Hello friends, welcome. I'm Commissar Mark and today we are going to be making a video about Season 3, especially playing with Augustus mod, which is going to cover basic numbers for playing this game. And why am I making this video? Well, I've mentioned these things in other videos before, but since I cannot expect everyone who watches something on the channel to know what I've talked about ever, it will be good to just make one solid video that's gonna cover most of these things in one big block, and so that you can come back to this one to just kind of refresh your memory. As it said, memory is mother of all wisdom. I do believe that's the case because I personally also forget a lot of these things. When you don't play the game for a bit and come back, all of these things can kind of get lost. But that being said, if you refresh it every now and again, usually that kind of flows back as you play the game and you start to remember what these things are. So again, I'm gonna be covering something I talked about on the channel before. If you don't want that, then that's fine. Again, this might not be for everyone. If you are a veteran player, a lot of these things you will know. But perhaps there's gonna be something that you might not be aware of either, because I also learn new things. It feels every month I learn something completely new about the game I've played since I was a kid, and just the level of depth that has been added with Augustus mod especially is insane. So without further ado, let's just get into it. Start with very basic concepts, okay? So a single farm will produce 9.6 food per year. That assumes that the carter from the farm can deliver the food to a granary or a warehouse within a reasonable time frame to preserve efficiency. If it's too far away, then he's not going to be able to return before next harvest is ready. And so, placing granaries and or warehouses as destinations for farmers to deposit their harvest to is important. But that's just tangent. So it's 9.6 food per year. This translates to 9,600 units of that kind of food in terms of granary stockpile space and market food, as well as if a house has food in it. Because when a carter delivers one cartload of, for example, fruit from a farm to a granary, it's gonna display there is 100 fruit in that granary now, because it takes that one and splits it into hundreds. If in Augustus mod there's a supply post, if supply post walker gets food from a granary, it also takes like 10 and splits it into hundreds, meaning it's 1,000 food now, because it's more convenient to calculate in detail how much food people eat. And how this is calculated is each person in a house eats set amount of food per, I think it's tick, in-game ticks, but you can summarize it in years time consumption. As we talked about, 9.6 food per year for a single farm translates to feeding 160 people. And so if we break that down, it should give us a number that a single person will eat. How much food they will eat per year, per month, okay, or per year as well. I'm gonna put the calculation on the screen right now. So this is the numbers behind food. If you have wheat and you are playing a central map or a desert map, you will be able to produce double the food from that, which means that if you're, even for exports, if you grow wheat on a desert map, suddenly your farm doesn't make 9.6 wheat per year, but it starts to make what is it? It's 19.4 wheat instead for export, single farm. So that produces a lot more. You can feed a lot of people from that, of course. Very useful. If it's a northern map, wheat is the standard value. It's not less, it's just normal, so 9.6. Okay, so that's farming and how production for value for that works. If you want to calculate farms, something I will note is that I don't believe that it is absolutely vital to calculate every single farm and how much population is this good block gonna have and how many people are gonna be in there, and then only have as many farms as needed. Slightly overproducing your food is good. so that you have a buffer, because evolving housing in this game is sort of organic. You oftentimes will progress through stages of evolution quite quickly, and then suddenly, or you add an extra house or something, suddenly you don't have enough food because you calculate exactly that amount. And that also, there's a first feeding cycle mechanic, essentially, which is each house can effectively stockpile in it a production from, like, I've seen a house have 10 food in it in total, which means, 500 fish, 500 fruit, and that's in a single 2x2 house. This food then means that, like, this house is having in it a buffer of over a year's worth of production from a single farm and just sitting on that food, and they will eat it. Also, how that works is houses in Augustus now eat food in equal measure. So if they get several types of food, they won't focus on one and like eat the wheat first, as it was. I think that's how it was in Julius. They'll eat all the food equally from all the food that's been deposited into the house with the market. Okay. Also, something in Augustus that's a recent change. Market ladies now have you have 2 market ladies. This is a special building market, right? Because it's so rare to see it. You have a building that sends out a roaming walker, the market lady with green skirts, which is distributing food, and it just roams in the block itself. I explained walkers in a recent video, so watch that if you want to. But market also sends out destination walkers, which are market ladies with brown or orange skirts, which head specifically to warehouses or granaries on the same road layout. They cannot go off-road, and they will collect food or goods that are enabled in the market settings. If you right-click on a market, you can disable, enable what they get, and you can also enable or disable market ladies to be able to access said granary or a warehouse. And if it's enabled, it's on the same road layout, they'll go there, collect food or goods, and bring it back to the block for distribution. This can be vital if you minimize travel time, because otherwise what can happen is if your city is interconnected, the market lady could decide to go across the city to get something, meaning that the market will run out of goods and it will result in devolution of your housing in that meantime. So I talked about the supply system in the most recent video. So if you are interested in how to make your city run like clockwork without having issues with, again, travel time for markets and what are the numbers behind that, watch that video. For now, this is about it for these basics for food and market ladies. However, we also have the question of goods, because goods happen on a different level. I mentioned how in Season 3, food is eaten in a house by population basis. The more people in a house, the more food is eaten. I also believe that 2x2 house stockpiles more food in it than 1x1 house. So that's maybe a little bit of a factor. In any case, that doesn't actually impact consumption rate. What does impact consumption rate is if you boost your city through an epithet from a series temple to reduce consumption by whopping 20%. I covered epithets in another video. I know I'm mentioning all of these, but I cannot physically go over every single thing, okay? So just if you're looking for a specific feature, grand temples and their epithets, there's a video for it. Military and even consumption rates for troops, which is something that's kind of crucial. All things you need to know about military. There's a video about all specific features. This is a generalistic video, okay? I cannot go into detail of everything in the universe. However, I will try to cover the essentials. So, yes, goods. Goods work differently than food. Goods do not get consumed at population basis. If there is a house with 1 person living in it, and there is a house next to it which has 80 people living in it, these 2 houses will consume the goods at the same rate if they are the same evolution level. Only housing that's achieved a certain evolution level will consume that kind of good, even if it's stockpiled in it. Sometimes you will see markets kind of preemptively preparing oil or other goods to start distributing into housing, even though the housing itself doesn't even consume that good yet, because they need a service first, because there are 2 kinds of things that you can usually, that you need to provide to a house to evolve it. Either it's a service or it's goods or food. Usually, providing service is much cheaper and easier to manage, and then the food and goods require production. So obviously, that takes more labor, it takes more workers to run that industry. and apart from like a service, which usually is just like one-time service for 10, 20 workers, something like that, which is quite manageable for a whole block. If it's you need to produce goods and then transport them, it's logistics strain, it's just a bigger headache, but of course it is necessary. There are also 2 housing stages specifically which provide a tax boost, and that is small insula and then grand insula. So just keep this in mind if you evolve your city, trying to aim for these 2 as milestones. Small insula for mid-game and grand insula for late game will help your prosperity, but especially tax boost or tax collection in the block. Okay. Goods. Let's come back to goods. So goods are not consumed at individual house level, but goods are not consumed at individual house level according to population. Goods are consumed only by house level, as in terms of each house consumes the same amount of goods, regardless of if it's a 1x1 or if it's 2x2. So 1x1s are effectively 4 times as inefficient in terms of consuming goods, because each workshop. So let's talk about production rates for a moment before we delve into consumption with houses. It's good to understand, as with the food, how much you produce, right? And so a single clay pit will produce 9.6 clay per year. There are some exceptions with stone and sand, I think. I'll put the numbers on the screen right now if I find them. But so a single clay pit would produce 9.6 clay per year. Each workshop for pottery would consume 4.8 clay per year and produce 4.8 pottery at peak efficiency with deliveries, of course, to a nearby warehouse. 4.8 pottery per year for a single workshop. Therefore, 2 workshops for a single raw resource production structure like timber yard or clay pit or even an olive farm or vines farm will produce again 9.6 delivered to 2 workshops. Each workshop consumes 4.8, outputting 4.8 by itself to a nearby warehouse, and then this 4.8 pottery, for example, would be enough to supply up to 20 houses per year with goods. And so we can calculate how much each house consumes in terms of goods on a warehouse. For 4.8 goods for a single workshop supplies 20 houses, calculations right here. And so with this knowledge, you can also account for, like, your usual peak efficiency block would be 40 to 45 houses maximum. So just over 2 workshops should be able to supply this amount of houses without issues. But it is not little. There are also epithets that can influence this. Again, there's the epithet video for you if you want some information on reducing consumption rates. But yes, the exception to this is, of course, Vine Workshop. Because Vine is produced at the same rate, 4.8 per year per single workshop, but houses that consume wine will consume it at double the rate as other goods, and so it's only 10 houses per single workshop supported with Vine. Something else is Tavern is special as a service because it consumes goods. It can consume food in terms of meat or fish, and then it needs Vine to then spawn walkers that go into the block and provide extra entertainment, which helps sentiment and helps evolution of houses. On some maps, Tavern is essential to beating it. And how is this different? Well, the houses don't actually drink the wine or eat the food from the tavern directly. How it works is Tavern will keep spawning new walkers into the block, and each walker that's spawned costs a set amount of wine or the food to spawn, and then as long as it's spawned, it just walks into the loop and distributes the entertainment. But how many houses the Tavern services, if it's 1 house or 40 houses, doesn't matter. Okay, so that's how that works. With that out of the way, there are some exceptions to production, namely with industry. So I'll put that on the screen right now regarding marble and gold, and as I mentioned before, that is also sand and stone and bricks. So these actually have different inputs and outputs. I'm gonna just put that on the screen right now because that's essential. Why is this information important? Is trade, so that you can look at a quota and like, oh, this trade route buys 40 weapons. how many workshops do I need to provide enough to satisfy that demand per year each time to maximize the trade? And there's an answer to that. With these numbers, you'll be able to look at it and say, yes, I can indeed do this. Also for importing food, if you need to import food, you can check, oh, how much population is this gonna supply effectively without, causing devolutions or running out. Other numbers we want to talk about. I might mention, again, the military in Augustus requires food and it consumes food, and at soldier per soldier basis, a fort consists of up to 16 troops in a single fort. And each of these troops eats food. So depending on how many troops are in that fort spawned currently, that much food they eat. And they can eat multiple food types. They act like a house where the supply post itself stocks all the food for all the forts at once, and then it consumes each kind equally. If multiple are allowed, if you give them multiple food types, there are benefits to morale and a little bit of health, I think, with the main one. You need to watch the video for military for that. But suffice to say, on very hard, the numbers for consumption for food in Augustus for troops is much higher than on other difficulties. On very hard, it is much higher. So it can actually be very impactful. So just something a little to note about that. And then some people might be asking, what is the output of a wharf? At maximum peak efficiency, I believe it's around 20, so like double the normal farm, slightly more than double normal farm output. But that assumes very close fishing point and then very big drop off for that food with a nearby granary for the wharf itself. But fishing can be very lucrative. It also doesn't take as many workers, it's just generally good. Fishing is really, really powerful on most maps. That's where it's allowed. So the main limitation is the shoreline. Something else to say, I'm thinking on the fly here so I don't forget any numbers. If you think yourself to something that I might have mentioned here, let me know, because I can always answer in the comments or, make future videos regarding something specific. However, I think we've kind of run out of the essential things. Again, I don't want to mention absolutely everything because that's really not what I want to get into. Something to note, I have a plan for making a video about sentiment and entertainment in the near future, but these two things are a bit complicated because there are so many things that can influence it, and the game is not very straightforward at conveying that information, so that it takes a long time to make this. So instead I'm making this for now so that we have something more basic. Now, before I close the video, this is going to be numbers for all the religion, because I will cover this briefly as it is important to notice, and I've made a video about it, but it's kind of in 3 of my videos I talk about different buildings, so it would be good to have one place to go to find all the information. And so usually I talk about how much worship space does a single building offer. And so, for example, a small temple offers 750 worship space in your city for that particular god. So a Venus temple, small temple to Venus, will offer 750 worship space for your city, and that matters, as even if you don't have that many people, even the gods will look at your city and see how much worship space you have, and generally they will calculate it just as your city grows. It's all that matters is your pop. And so the higher population you have, the more temples you need to have. And if you have very efficient blocks, you could end up having to need more worship space than you would naturally get from just putting your temples in blocks. And so that's where other structures come in handy. If there is local marble or even cheap imported marble, you could go ahead and get some other temples, because just small ones, they are not levy efficient, because you will be paying a lot of levy monthly upkeep to keep these temples running. In Augustus, also forts and other structures like a highway will also have levy, meaning that they are expensive to keep running, adding continuous upkeep. No, it's just not one-time cost, but the levy is continuous, right? And even like if it says 4 levy per month, yeah, it doesn't seem like much for denarii per month, but you need to realize you pay it yearly, and so it ends up being 48 denarii per month for a single temple, and that adds up when you have 30 temples. it can be significant. So, small temple, 750 worship space for a single god that it's dedicated to in your city. If you build a Lararium, Lararium offers 10 worship space for all gods at once in your city. It does need Lararium, does need fire and engineering protection though, so just keep that in mind. And it needs to be placed within 2 tiles from a road because of that. It doesn't need adjacent road though. It does not need you to like put it like a prefect adjacent to a road. It doesn't spawn any walkers. So it just, you know, it being within 2 tiles from the road means it functions. If you place it elsewhere, it will burn down and collapse, and it also will not work. So just keep that in mind. Altars give 50 worship space for that particular god, and it's also a 1x1 structure. But the thing is, you need to, it's like a temple, it's just for that god, for that altar. So like, altar to Neptune will give you 50 worship space for Neptune, but not for other gods. But you can use it kind of fine-tune if you want to worship one god more than others. However, it's still, I think the altars are a bit niche. If you go for this approach with spam of altars or Lararia, I would go Lararia, and because you end up using the same space for if you want to worship all the gods equally anyway. It's just altars are more visually pleasing perhaps to some people if you want to set that up. So why would you build Larariums or the altars? They are very expensive. Yes, they are, but they also don't have any levy. And so if you were to have a large amount of money, but you would not be able to sustain upkeep long term, having at least some Lararia in your city is useful, and they also give very good desirability, being the best 1x1 decoration. Of course, they get outpaced by like 2x2, 2x2 statues or ponds. These things based off statues, they are of course bad. 2x2s have more range, but for 1x1s, even statues are worse slightly worse than Larariums. So just keep that in mind. So small temple is 750 population worship space in your city for that single god. If you build a large temple, I believe that is 4,000. No, sorry, that's 2,500 population worship space for that particular god in your city. 2,500. And then Grand Temple is 4,000, I believe. I will, if I'm wrong, the numbers on the screen are the correct ones, by the way. Because I'm making the video and then I'm gonna do the editing. So if I find out that I was wrong, the numbers will display the correct amount. So I think it's 4,000 for Grand Temples. And then Oracles give 500 worship space for all gods at once, like Lararium, but like 50 Lararia, basically. So Oracle does that. Then Mausoleums, I don't remember the numbers, so I'm gonna put that on the screen right now. And Nympham, also put that on the screen right now. And that are all the worship structures in the game. Don't forget, keep the gods happy, it is essential. Some people like to play without god effects on, but I would say play as you want. But this trivializes the game a lot, because the maps are designed in such a way that you pay upkeep for this. It's not just annoyance, it's you pay levy, the upkeep, you pay upfront costs. You have to staff the temples. These things play in part if the balancing on the map is designed around it. You are supposed to be able to, have such a drain on resources and workers and money in your city. If you don't, then the map's gonna be unbalanced and you will have much easier time than it's designed for. But again, play as you want, just mentioning it. In any case, that's about worship space. Before we end the video, I have something else to cover, and that is card depots. Because I've covered it in the most recent video and my video on card depots themselves, but this is so essential that I feel like I have to cover it here. Because again, logistics is a big part of the game, and now we can have so much control with card depots that this information should be part of the basic tutorial basically now with Augustus. And so as the card depot is a structure you can build. It takes 15 workers currently. This could change with balance changes in the future. And card depot will allow you to transport resources from point A to point B. So from, for example, a granary to another granary or even to a warehouse. And this can be used to supply blocks with food or goods, or even use it to facilitate long-range distances for transportation of goods for allowing trade. And so the car depot will spawn up to 3 oxes if it has full employment. With less employees, it spawns less. Each of these oxes can do a trip where it can pick up 4 units of goods or 16 units of food at once and transport it elsewhere. That's half worth of granary of food in one trip. Okay, and so a single car depot, if it is placed within 80 tiles distance from within source or destination, these things are 80 tiles away from each other, and the car depot should be preferably near source or destination. Then if it's within these 80 tiles, the car depot itself will facilitate transport of goods, enough goods for supplying up to 200 houses, which is up to 4 blocks, peak efficiency blocks you can supply with a single car depot, assuming you can produce this amount of goods, which for 200 houses, we know the calculation for the workshops. We know that with around 9 workshops, 10 workshops, we should be able to supply enough goods to constantly keep these 4 blocks completely evolved with that kind of good. So only pottery, for example. So you would need another car depot, then ferrying furniture if you want them to be medium insula, and so on and so forth. Okay. If you transport food with the car depot, as I mentioned, it's quite high numbers. It can carry up to 192 units of food per year, meaning that it can feed 3,200 population with a single depot if you carry it to a granary that then has a connection to blocks which have markets to collect that food. That depot will yearly transport enough food to constantly feed 3,200 people. Also assuming you produce that food in the first place, putting it in the granary, of course. But logistics is a key part of the game, and this is how the car depot works. So I hope that this video has shown a little bit of light on mechanics that might be a little bit obscure for some people, and it helps them understand how this game works and what are the numbers behind it, because that's what we need to play efficiently and be able to master the game. If you use this knowledge to play the vanilla campaign, you will absolutely destroy the vanilla campaign, by the way. So, it might even take a little away as in terms of the little magic from the game by knowing absolutely everything, and yes, but there are myriad of custom maps and also the custom campaign you might get into if you want to. So, again, ask about anything you might want. Thanks for watching the video and see you around. Bye.